Welcome to the SBS Digital Learning Hour, brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department. We're coming to you today from a conference room in Central Office, bringing you the latest news in Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom. We'll also inform you the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you're new to using technology or a seasoned vet, we are here to help. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas, the Bearded Tech Ed Guy. You can find me out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Bearded Tech Ed, or you can go to my new website, beardedtechedguy.com. There you can find out latest blog posts, latest podcasts, and all sorts of other great materials as I'm creating them as we go along. So I'll be excited for you guys to be checking that out and leaving some feedback there. In case you missed it, we are into May. This is Teacher Appreciation Week, and we definitely appreciate all teachers and everything they do. That's why we're here, is to help them do their job a little bit easier, a little bit better. And so, again, we thank you for the time that we've been able to spend with you, and we hope that you are having a good week this week. In case you missed it, while we are in May, we've only got a few more weeks before the end of MCAS this year. So that means we're getting closer and closer to the end of the year. If you're not sure of your testing schedule, make sure that you reach out to your test coordinator. Hopefully you guys have figured this out already. If not, here's just a little reminder that at the end of this month, the 23rd, I believe, is the final day for MCAS. For this week, we're doing something a little different. For the next few weeks, actually, we're going to be spending some time talking about different tools in the classroom that you can use with your students, especially with the end of the year coming. We have some great ways to integrate technology authentically into your classroom. With that, we're just going to take a quick pause, and then I'll get into our topic for today. You're already listening to me right now and through this podcast, so you understand the value of a podcast. Many of your colleagues, they might not know about how they could do a podcast in the classroom. They might not understand how a podcast can be helpful. Podcasts are so popular. I mean, the fact that you're listening to me right now is proof positive, because many of you don't even know who I am, and you mostly are listening because you've heard of something either I've said or someone I've interviewed that you really liked and has helped you. So a lot of times podcasts, they bring back the old time radio feel, more talk radio style. And that's what we are doing today. And we're actually going to talk about how you can use podcasts in the classroom. I know if I was still teaching today, this would be one of the things that I would try to pull into my classroom. As you know, podcasts, there are many different ways to do them. There's the kind where we do the interview. There are ways where someone is sharing information like we are actually today. Other times it could be a way to tell a story or go through history. I know there's Serial, there's Freakonomics. Those are both different podcasts that even though they're podcasts, they do different things. In a classroom, with some basic understanding and skills, you can actually do podcasting with your students. For example, instead of doing a book report, like a written book report, they could record their book summaries. Podcasts can also be used with group assignments. Students can be interviewing each other. And one of the ways that I would even be thinking about doing this is having students become experts on a person in history. This would be especially effective for explorer units. I know grade 5 does that a lot with their social studies. You could have students become experts on a student, and then they could either be that person and answer questions that way, or they could be interviewed as a way for them to share the information. So instead of, again, writing a regular report, the report now becomes something that is more than just a piece of paper. It allows them to tell the story of that explorer. And again, if you're doing writing, a final product of your paper not only can be the paper itself, but a audio recording of that paper, and then you can turn around, string them together, and create a class of podcast episodes that your students can listen to and give each other comments and feedbacks on. I know when I taught writing, one of the things I always had my students do was to read their story out loud Whether they listened to me or not is a completely different story, but for the most part, the students who read their stories out loud, they always found ways to improve their writing. And a lot of that is because they would focus on trying to read word for word what it said, and when they were reading it, they realized that something was not quite right. The story didn't flow, there was maybe some grammatical errors, a whole host of things, and then by reading out loud, it allowed them to figure those out. By doing it as a podcast, you're basically creating an audiobook of your writing, which is really awesome. It's also, podcasts are a great way for students to sharpen up their skills at presenting and talking in front of people, because even though they're not talking directly in front of people, they still have to know how to speak eloquently and speak with sincerity and be able to deliver their message to an audience. Now, if we're just sticking with just podcasts, one of the things you could think about is having students explain their thinking with math. For example, if they have a complex problem that they're trying to solve, if you have them talking it out and explaining to others in an audio format, then they can turn around and use that audio format and maybe make some screenshots of it, and then boom, they've got an explanation video or an explainer video for that concept. In science, students can record podcasts to explain different or difficult scientific topics. They can talk about whatever you're doing in the classroom, whether it is with biology or life sciences. They could explain it out. They can go through the scientific method and to prove their theories. So these are just a few different ways that you can integrate podcasts into your classroom as a student-created assignment. Now, what's really great is there's a lot that goes into making a podcast. I know for me, it's just like with the blog. I do a lot of research and I work out the message I'm trying to get, and then I turn around and put it pen to paper to the blog. With podcasting, I do the same thing. So for this talk about doing podcasts, I've done a lot of research on how to do podcasts in the classroom, and I'm going to include all these sites and information that I found in show notes so that you can have access to them too. But really, it's great because there's a lot of different skills students need to have when it comes to recording a podcast. And so there are some things that need to happen. And of course, number one is research. Without any research, students can sit here and ramble on and maybe or maybe not get the assignment completed in what you're asking. But just like a good paper, students have to research their topic. They need to know it in front of you. One of the things that they might even do is before they record, they just have an outline with their major points. Instead of them just sitting there and reading the whole thing word for word, the idea is that they know the information and that they're able to share and convey that through the microphone, through the computer, through the recording to anybody. So before they can even sit down, they need to know what to say so that there's not a lot of ums and pauses and so's. I know that's one thing for me is even though I know what I'm going to say and I have notes, I still will pause by using ums and so's. Or my favorite, which is so You can hear that one actually a lot when it comes to the interviews. When I ask a question, I'm given a response, and then I go, and then I ask my next question. A lot of the times those things create what's called dead air, and having those pauses, you know that you have something to fill. And if you have your notes in front of you and you got your research and you're all set on what you're going to say, you will reduce a lot of those ums and pauses, which will make editing a whole lot easier. Another thing you need to do is you need to make sure that students can record. And so for a lot of us, the laptops that the students have, since we are one-to-one, of course, the microphones are not the best. Students can go in, they can adjust the levels of the microphone and pick up as much as they can, but anytime they have the microphones all the way up, if they're in a loud room, it's going to pick up everything, not just what they're speaking, and it will make it harder for them to communicate their ideas because you will be drowned out by all the background noise. So they need a place that they can record, and either having a recorder or what we do for this podcast is we have a microphone and we plug it in through the USB And then we have a program like Audacity to record. Now, when you're like, wait a minute, now you're talking about buying something? Yes. To do podcasts really well, it would be good to have a microphone. And there are decent microphones out there in the $20 to $40 range. It's something that you could easily go on Donors Choose and ask for a few of them so that you can have multiple microphones to do multiple podcasts all at one time if you can get students to have quiet areas where they can do them. By having a microphone, it's going to improve the quality of the sound, and it will allow the students to be able to speak clearly and well without having to have their face plastered onto the front of their laptop. Sound quality is key. That's microphones come in. And if you're using one that's connected to the computer, and you're using a program like Audacity, which is free, all you have to do is download it to the students' laptops, which you as a teacher have the ability to do. You will use that to edit the podcast, so edit your audio recording. There's many things that you can do. There's many tools. Many people have made training videos or the best way to make your voice sound professional in Audacity out on YouTube. And those videos are very helpful in trying to create an understanding of what you need to do. You don't need to be a master editor to be able to edit a podcast decently. There's just a few practicing things that you'll do. One of the things is noise reduction, so that students would have to learn how to be able to eliminate background noise. Another thing would be your equalizers and your compressors. On Audacity, you can edit all that stuff after it's been recorded. It just takes a little bit of time, practice, and ears. I might also suggest that they use earbuds or headphones while they're editing so that they can hear clearly. And again, they could edit in a loud room as long as they've got something to cover their ears. I totally just pointed at my ears while I was talking, thinking that you guys are actually looking at me while I'm doing this. And this is a podcast, of course, so you're not. So you totally did not see me just do that. By doing the editing, you'll get rid of a lot of the extra noises in the background, like fans or the laptop fan, and any interruptions. I know I've done podcast interviews where I've had to re-ask questions because you hear the ding, the sounds from the speakers in the classroom when there's all school announcements. So to help students be able to get rid of that, that's just some basic editing things and some practice. All this stuff takes a little bit of practice. Once they've created it, they want to make sure that it sounds good, so they should probably listen to it without pausing and stopping with headphones so they can hear how it sounds. And once that is done, the students would just save it, and then they would export it as an MP3 so that you could have it posted to Unified Classroom so that all students can use it. If you created, for example, a discussion board, and you can have all the students put the podcasts in the discussion board, and it works really well. If you want to spend some money, there are ways that you can publish it for the world to hear. Programs like Spreaker, like what we use for the district, that one's probably the lowest costing one. A lot of the other ones, they have free 5 hours, and so you could, if you set up one of those, that you could just get the MP3. Students could hand it in through assignments, and then you could take that MP3, put it into the podcasting platform, and then once it's published there, students can listen to it on any device through any way that you have it set up to share. So, as you know, with our podcast, we share through iTunes and Stitcher and Spreaker and Spotify, and pretty much anywhere where you can listen to a podcast, you can actually listen to us. And so I really think that Audacity is perfect for the classroom. It's really easy to use as software. You definitely will want some software. The ones that come free in our laptops to be able to record, they don't have the power of something like Audacity does. Many podcasters, and again, doing my research before I started podcasting, they either said there's really one of two good options. One is to use Audacity, which is a free tool, which it does take a little bit of a learning curve to use, or you pay your $20 a month for your Adobe Premiere and your whole Adobe package and use Adobe to record also. which I'm not suggesting you do that, because for your purposes, Audacity is probably enough. And that's very easy to use. Podcasts, they can be something that students can create. And a lot of times we're thinking about ways that we can encourage students to be creative and create something in the classroom. While a paper is what we're all kind of used to, by making podcasts, we can allow students to take that jump to the next level. And thinking about SAMR, if students are just reading their paper, that's modification, substitution in that range. But if students are now taking their paper and making something dynamic with it, for example, I can think of doing a science lesson where a student is describing the water cycle. And what would be great about describing the water cycle, and why I'm just sharing this one with you, is because by using Audacity, you can add in some sound effects. So they can have sound of like rain happening, and maybe they add some thunderstorms in as part of that water cycle, and you hear running water. So as they're talking, you can hear these things, and it now elevates what would have been just a picture or a poster or maybe a short paper on the water cycle. You now have this dynamic way to share the water cycle. And students, they will have had to spend a lot of time making sure they had all the information. They knew what sounds to go where. And when they create the podcast, then they are able to use it to its full potential. There's one school, I know I talked about it earlier this year, and it's where they're located. I'm pretty sure it's Oregon, but I may be wrong on that. But what they did is they have high school students creating a living history of the town that they live in. And so they're going to senior homes and interviewing seniors about what it was like to live in the town during different time periods. And so when they're talking to them about that, they're recording it and they're putting it together. So now they have a whole audio history of their town, which is amazing, which could also be a great assignment for a school to do. And anytime we're thinking about, like, to me, that could be a problem-solving type thing where we have this problem of we're losing our history, the history of, say, for example, Springfield, and we want to be able to keep it and gain a better understanding. Who better to tell us what it was like living in Springfield in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, than the people who were living here at that time? So as a class, you guys can create a list of questions generic questions that you would ask to find out more of the history of that time. You could do this for different neighborhoods. You could do this for the whole city. You could even do this for the school. I know Liberty School has a 100-year anniversary thing coming up soon where they're having students record people talking about what it was like to be in that school during their time period, which is a great use of technology authentically in the classroom. Sure, you could write a paper, and that also would be authentic because you're capturing what is happening. But for some reason, audio version, power of your words, can create such a vivid story of what was going on. That's why they were doing the podcast, and that's why I think it would be a great assignment to do also. Now, you're saying, well, I teach a younger grade. What about podcasting in a younger grade? Great question. This is where having a little bit more teacher intervention helps. Having teachers that can go through and just do some of those basic editing things, like getting rid of background noise, which is super easy to do. And that's where maybe the students have scripted out more of what they're going to say. I can see use cases of students who are level 1, level 2 English language learners, and they are spending their time practicing their English by recording themselves talking and then playing it back. Or maybe they're creating their own audio dictionary where they say a word in their language and then they say it in the English language and then they use it in a sentence so that they understand where it all connects. So they're basically making like an audio dictionary. Like I said, the ideas, they are endless with how you can use this in the classroom. There are ways that you can just use it as a simple substitution, or you can go and create something that is amazing. Maybe one of your students will be the next student to create cereal which is one of the largest podcasts ever. I'm pretty sure it's somewhere in the 5 million times downloaded. I don't know if you've ever listened to Serial. If you like podcasts, you probably have. About half this country listens to at least one podcast a year. Many of those people listen to multiple podcasts daily. I know I do. I know other people who do too. And there are statistics and data to back that up. So I hope this time has inspired you to check out trying to do podcasts in your classroom. Again, if you do have any questions, you can always reach out to us at DLA support at springfieldpublicschools.com. We'd love to talk with you and work with you on how to do it. Maybe even come out and work with your students as you're doing it too. You could also look through the show notes where we have a whole lot of information on how to do podcasting in the classroom and use it as a great classroom tool. As we wrap up this week, if you know of anyone who would be a great person to interview in the classroom about the things that they are doing, we'd love to hear that. You can email us at DLA support. You can also message me directly. You can also message me through my website or on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, where we're always posting new content and finding out what other people are doing and sharing that with you. Because as a person by myself, I don't have a big, large team that is doing all the research. I do it all. And so anything that I share out with you, I have looked through, I have vetted. I think that is going to be great in the classroom. And I highly encourage you to follow. If you're not a big user of those platforms, you can always find stuff out on my website at beardedtechedguy.com. That is it for this week's podcast. I'm Mike Thomas, the Bearded Tech Ed Guy, and this is the SBS Digital Learning Hour.